We're just a few days away from one of the biggest international games in all of world soccer. The U.S. men's national team will face El Tri, the Mexican selection, in Cincinnati for an all-important 3 points in the World Cup qualifying window. This is a huge game because if Mexico is able to get 3 points, they've pretty much solidified themselves as qualifying for the World Cup. It'll go a long way for them. For the United States, this is super important to get those 3 points at home to make sure that we continue to have easy sailing to the World Cup. Not to mention just the rivalry and the societal issues and the politics and the amount of people that are from Mexico that live in the United States, and just all that's on the line in this all-important game. It is one of the most interesting soccer games in the entire world, and it is always entertaining. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the Mexican national team, see if we can predict their lineup for the all-important game in Cincinnati, and see if we can kind of get in Tata Martino's head and figure out what are some of the positional issues he'll be facing whenever his team takes on the U.S. men's national team, and answer the all-important question, is Mexico beatable? And I think you'll like what you hear. All that and more on this episode of The Yank Report. What's up, my name's Sam, this is The Yank Report. This is a show where we talk about the U.S. men's national team. If you're into that, hit the subscribe button. If you want to support the channel, hit that like button. Let's start at the back. And this is one of the lead pipe locks on the Mexican national team. He's been the keeper for years, and he's probably going to be the keeper till the day that he dies. He is Guillermo Ochoa, the curly-haired, high-flying Mexican keeper from Club America. Now, Ochoa in the past has been one of the more dominant keepers in all of CONCACAF, but at this point, I don't know if I'm quite as afraid of him as I was maybe 4 or 6 years ago, something like that. He's getting up there in age. And speaking of up there in age, one of the biggest complaints that Mexican fans have about the national team is the age of their goalkeepers. I mean, these guys are, 34, 36, and 39. A combined goalkeeping age of over 100. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. There's a lot of fans who want to see a lot of youth introduced into the goalkeeping ranks. But as of right now, Tata Martino has been going with this geriatric group of goalkeepers. Now, at left back, this is most likely going to be Jesus Gallardo. He is the 27-year-old from Monterrey that more than often than not lines up and in the left back. He can play right back too, but he kind of switches sides. But more often than not, when Mexico has a big game, he's going to be in the team. He is a left back that likes to, like a classic Mexican left back, very technical, likes to get up the sideline, likes to put crosses into the box and look for cutbacks, stuff like that. A very competent player that always plays well, it seems, against the United States. Moving over to the right back. Now, if there is a player that is akin to what Sebastian Lletget is for the U.S., for Mexico, that is Chaka Rodriguez, the right back for the Mexican national team. Looks a lot like the Mummy from those old movies, The Mummy. He's a very bald, very slow right back that the Mexican fans just love to hate on, man. He is a 30-year-old from Tigres, not very quick, but he does put in a nice cross. He will look to get down the inline and make something happen, but he's definitely beatable. And he's a player that a lot of the Mexican fans call a liability on that back line. So it'll be interesting to see how the U.S. can exploit that with their speed and quickness in the attack. Now, whenever it comes to center backs, it's going to get kind of interesting because Mexico has been mixing it up a lot in recent games. Araujo has played, Moreno's played, Montes has played. That's kind of the three guys they've been rotating, at least in the last window. But unfortunately for Mexico, and fortunately for the United States, Nestor Araujo picked up a very silly red card where he got 2 yellow cards in a game in Mexico's last qualifier, so he's not going to be eligible to play against the United States. And then Montes, the 24-year-old center back from Monterrey, got injured in one of the last Liga MX games. So it looks like Mexico is down to two interesting guys. One of them is the old warrior, Hector Moreno, a player that if you're a fan of the U.S. men's national team, you've seen play many games and has been a formidable opponent in the past, but at this point he's getting up there in age. He is 33 years old from Monterrey, and he's a bit of a battleship. He's a bit of a slower guy and not as quick as he used to be, not as dominant in the air as he used to be. Partnering with Moreno will likely be Johan Vasquez. He's the 23-year-old from Genoa. Vasquez was loaned to Genoa this year with an option to buy. Didn't start the year playing very much for Genoa, but in the last few games has gotten a string of starts together. If you watched Gianluca Busio play in Venezia against Genoa recently, Vasquez was in that game and he played very well. I'm assuming that with the injuries and the red cards to the other players, that's going to be the player that Mexico goes with for the other center back. Now, this would be Vasquez's third cap with the Mexican national team. He hasn't gotten a lot of time with that squad. He's one of the younger players on that squad, which is really interesting because at 23 years old, he'd be one of the older players for the U.S. men's national team. But for Mexico, 23 is a child. That's kind of one of the big differences between the two squads. So whether Martino goes with Vasquez or one of the other Mexican center backs, it's looking like, maybe some of the first choice players, some of the players that have played in some of the previous World Cup qualifiers are not going to be available, and Mexico is going to have to start a center back pairing that doesn't have a ton of experience together. But at the same time, the U.S. starts a different center back pairing every game, and we've been doing all right, so maybe that won't be as big a deal as we're making it out to be. As we move to the midfield, we have another interesting dilemma for Mexico, and it's kind of along the same lines. First, there's the lock. There's Etson Alvarez. Etson Alvarez is the 24-year-old defender for Ajax, and he is one of the best midfielders in CONCACAF. He's one of those metronome-type players. He's a player that oftentimes, whenever Mexico's in possession, he likes to drop back between the center backs, ping long balls out to the fullbacks who have pushed up high. He could put a ball wherever he wants on the field. Just one of the top high-quality players, not only for Mexico, but in CONCACAF in general. Now, ahead of him, we have a lot of question marks. And I know you might be saying to yourself, how can you have question marks? One of the other guys is going to be Hector Herrera, the best player in the Gold Cup, one of the stalwarts for the Mexican national team. Well, not so fast. Ache has run into a terrible run of form over for Atletico Madrid. He hasn't been starting much lately at all. And whenever he has come on for cleanup minutes, he hasn't looked very good, to the point where a lot of Mexico fans are calling for him to be dropped from the national team against the United States. It's a very interesting dilemma. To make things worse, Mexico has really been trying to figure out who's going to be that third midfielder along with Herrera and Etson Alvarez. In the last few games, they've started Romo, Pineda, Cordova, and Rodriguez, and trying to figure out a combination that's going to stick. One thing they know for sure is that in the Canada game, they started Herrera and Guardado. Guardado, of course, how old is Guardado at this point? He's 35 years old from Real Betis. Guardado, another just great Mexican warrior, a player that has put in so many wonderful shifts for El Tri in the past, but at 35 years old has lost his legs completely. And whenever you pair him next to Hector Herrera, who's not fleet of foot himself, it makes for a very slow midfield, and that got exploited against Canada. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mexico do with that third midfielder spot, and if they even play Hector Herrera at all. To make matters worse for Mexico, they're going to be up against an extremely young, extremely athletic U.S. men's national team midfield with two guys in absolute wonderful form in Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie. Both guys very fleet of foot, very physical, very in-your-face players that are going to run at the older legs of the Mexican midfield all game long. And that third player for the U.S. men's national team very likely could be Yunus Musa, an 18-year-old who's got an engine with fuel to burn and will run these players ragged all across the midfield. So it'll be interesting to see how Tata decides to handle that. The two players that a lot of Mexican fans are turning towards are Oberlin Pineda of Cruz Azul and Luis Romo of Cruz Azul, 25 and 26 years old, respectively. These are younger players that are looking to come into the Mexican national team and be that next chapter for the Mexican national team. But at the same time, they're not the players that Hector Herrera or Andres Guardado were in their prime. It's going to be a step down, and that's kind of the struggle that Mexico is facing right now, is a lot of these old veterans are kind of reaching the end of their careers, the twilight of their careers, and how Mexico fills in the gaps behind them is going to be very telling to how Mexico is going to perform over this World Cup and of course, that all-important 2026 World Cup that's going to be hosted in North America. Now let's move on to probably the strength of the Mexican national team right now. That is the front line. And let's start with Tecatito Corona, the 28-year-old for Porto. He's having a tough time over in Porto right now. He seems to be dropped. He hasn't played much at all. There's been times where he's not even dressed for the roster. It seems like there's some stuff going on between Tecatito and Porto right now. There's a lot of rumors that he could be moving on in the wintertime. So the October has not been good for Tecatito. Now, despite that, most Mexican fans still feel like Tecatito is going to be one of the wingers that faces off against the United States. And that says something, because I remember a few years ago looking at this Mexican national team and seeing wingers like Chuki Lozano, Tecatito, Diego Lainez, Pizarro, and a few years later Pizarro has completely fallen off the world since his move to Miami. Lainez is a healthy scratch. He's not getting many minutes for his club in Europe, so he didn't get called in to the Mexican national team, and Tecatito's fallen out of favor with his club. Now, that being said, moving on to Mexico's other winger, Irving Chuki Lozano, he's in fantastic form for Naples right now. He's got 2 goals and 2 assists on this season, and he's just one of the classiest, best players in CONCACAF at the moment. Whenever you watch Mexico, there's moments where Lozano just kind of takes over the game and dazzles. He's got that flair that's consistent with the great Mexican players of the past, and he's one of those players that can just, in a moment, just take over a game and score a goal, kind of win it for his team. Always going to be a handful. So between the out-of-form dribbler Tecatito and one of the top wingers in CONCACAF and Lozano is going to be the return of the stalwart striker for the Mexican national team. That is Rahul Jimenez. Jimenez, the 30-year-old striker for Wolves, of course, returned from what was one of the most brutal injuries we've ever seen from a soccer player, a head injury that had him out for like 2 seasons. Whenever he came back, nobody was sure what type of player he was going to be. Before his injury, he was absolutely the best striker in CONCACAF, one of the top players in CONCACAF. He was rolling with that Wolves team that was just outperforming all expectations over in the EPL. Since returning from his injury, he's right back into form. He's starting every game for Wolves at the moment. He has 2 goals and 2 assists on the season. He will be an absolute handful for a U.S. men's national team back line that, of course, is going to be without John Brooks, which is a self-inflicted wound, and Serginho Dest, who picked up an injury right before the U.S. men's national team camp. So that's just about where we stand right now with the Mexican national team. It's interesting. In years past, the big thing that Mexico has always had was like this extreme depth. It seems like, whenever one player left, there was this other player right behind them where maybe the skills were diminished a little bit, but not a whole lot. And Mexico could just come at us in waves, out-substitute us, and just outlast us. Now, we're in a situation where it seems like some of the stalwarts for the Mexican national team are getting up there in age and their skills are starting to decline, and some of the new guys coming in aren't quite up to the standards of the past. And even some of the younger guys or some of the attackers, which are just always so great for the Mexican national team. When in the case of Rahul Jimenez, if Rahul Jimenez goes down, Funes Mori is the man behind him. Funes Mori is a player that is not well liked by the Mexican national team fans. If you look at El Tri's official Twitter account, anytime they put out a lineup or anything like that, all you'll see is comments with people asking about where's Chicharito, why is Funes Mori keep getting called up, is it because he's Argentinian and the coach is Argentinian, that kind of thing. On the wings, even though Tecatito is out of form and hasn't been playing much, it's very much expected by the fan base that he's going to start because there's just not a lot of wingers that can match what Tecatito can do on the wing. Lozano, of course, is a fantastic player and will be very difficult to deal with. But it's interesting that there's not just waves and waves of Mexican attackers that are going to be able to come in this game and dominate. Likewise, in the midfield, whenever you have a situation where fans are questioning whether Ache is going to be able to lead the midfield for Mexico and be that captain as in years past and just be that dominant midfielder that can dictate the game. Are these younger guys like Pineda or Romo or Cordova or whoever it's going to be? And again, whenever I say younger guys, I mean like 23, 24-year-olds. These would be veterans in the U.S. men's national team. They're younger in the Mexican national team. Are these younger guys going to be able to come in and fill the shoes? Going back to the back line, it looks like another situation where Hector Moreno is going to have to come in at a point where I've seen Mexican fans very much say that they believe that Moreno is a liability in defense. But, because of these injuries, it's looking very much like he's going to have to start. And next to him is Johan Vasquez in his 3rd cap for the Mexican national team, going to be up for it against a United States team that is high-flying. It's coming off a really well-played game against Costa Rica, albeit a much weaker competition. But if you look at the Mexican national team and you compare them to the United States national team, there's absolutely no comparison whenever it comes to like young players playing at a very high level in Europe week in and week out. There's just not a lot of young players playing in the Champions League for Mexico. There's not a lot of old players playing in the Champions League for Mexico. So whenever you have guys like Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, even Gianluca Busio, Tim Weah, Brendan Aronson, and of course Ricardo Pepi, guys that are high flying and very young and are going to be able to just run and run and run. It's going to be interesting to see how that Mexican national team holds up to that. Are they going to have the energy, and is their technical ability going to be able to overcome the athletic ability from the U.S. men's national team? In years past, Mexico versus USA has always been technique versus athleticism. Technique versus athleticism. And at this point, the U.S. still has that advantage whenever it comes to the athleticism, but we've closed the gap tremendously whenever it comes to technique. At this point, tactics is going to become a lot bigger issue for both squads. Either way, it's going to be a really interesting night and a really important night for both sides. And I think just a night where Mexico needs to win this, man. Mexico needs to win to show to their fan base that, you know, it's not over yet, that Mexico is still the most dominant force in CONCACAF, and despite some of these aging stars, they're going to have enough left in the tank to make a run at the World Cup and put a quality side on the field in Qatar. If the United States wins this game, if we go 3-0 against Mexico in the last few games, it's going to say a lot about Mexico, and it's going to cause a big stir within the El Tri national team. It's going to make people look at maybe some of these older players, so players like Chaka Rodriguez and Hector Moreno, and ask, like, are these players who are kind of up there in age in their careers, Guardado, are they going to be the players to lead Mexico into the World Cup in 2022? It's a massive, massive game for them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how all of that plays out on the field in Cincinnati. I cannot wait. It is one of the greatest games in all of world soccer. There's so much on the line. And you, not even talking about soccer, there is so much on the line between the fan bases. It is just one that we always have circled in our calendars. There's so many fascinating storylines from, you know, the political side of things, the amount of culture that's on both sides of the border. Whenever you have guys on the field like Ricardo Pepi, who, you know, grew up just right across the border in El Paso, and just has so many family members and friends that are El Tri supporters, and it's just going to have that pressure on them throughout the game. It's just going to be a absolute blast to watch. So what do you think about that scouting report? Are you still as worried about Mexico as you were before this video? Honestly, after doing all this research, I feel like the U.S. has a hell of a shot to really take it to Mexico and play the best game against Mexico that we've ever played before. I really think that we can go in and boss this midfield and really take it to this El Tri side. Let me know in the comment sections what you think about this game. As always, si puede hablar español, dígame un comentario en español. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for hitting that like button and that subscribe button. If you want more Yank Report, if you really want to support the channel, you can become a member. Get access to behind the scenes content and get some great badges and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Thank you to Manuel Alvarez for being a tier 2 supporter. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.